Welcome to My Psychedelic Roots, a podcast of conversations with people from a broad swath of lived experience to explore their psychedelic beginnings or roots, what led them to start using psychedelics, what those early experiences were like, and how those roots have impacted their life's unfolding. My name is Amy Bartlett, and it is my hope that these stories, generously shared by my guests, offer insight and perspective into the lived reality of psychedelic experiencing. Please feel welcome to subscribe, to follow the show, to get the latest conversations in your podcast feed. And you're always invited to share this episode with others if you feel inspired. And so, as always, whoever, wherever, and whenever you are, welcome. I'm glad you're here. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Anthony D. Virgilio, a father, a registered psychotherapist, and a student of sacred plant teachers. Anthony is deeply interested in the connection between mental and emotional health, relational dynamics, and spirituality, and he integrates these perspectives into his therapeutic work. And as we hear in our conversation together, he also integrates them into his own work with psychedelic medicines. Anthony also studies vitalist herbalism, Indigenous healing modalities, and principles of traditional Chinese medicine. He's a firekeeper and song carrier for the Anishinaabe Elder Douglas Cardinal, and a humble student of North and South American Indigenous teachings and ceremonies. In our conversation together, Anthony and I talk about the fear, confusion, and isolation he experienced as a child, and the bravery he worked to cultivate as he tried to make sense of a world that felt very unsafe in both the physical and spiritual realms. We talk about some of his first experiences with cannabis and the transpersonal experiences he accessed with his plant teacher, before eventually, and guided by his wife, making his way towards his first psychedelic experience with ayahuasca 14 years ago, a foundational relationship that continues to shape his life and practice today. There's a vulnerable and thoughtful conversation together, and Anthony's commitment to safety and harm reduction, his sensitivity to the importance of spiritual accompaniment, and the need for both personal and social ethics in psychedelic experiencing was on full display. It was a privilege and a pleasure to learn about Anthony's unique path, and to hearing about his hopes for the unfolding of the psychedelic revival. And so, let's hear more about Anthony's psychedelic roots. Anthony, welcome. It's lovely to have you here today.
Thank you, Amy.
As we begin our conversation, as I'd like to do, is just to open the conversation by offering space for you to talk a little bit about what's alive for you today, anything that you want people to know about your background or your life before moving into a conversation about your psychedelic roots.
Yeah, well, I'm a father. I have two kids. One of them is 4, the other is 6 months. And that's been a lot of fun and challenging at the same time. I'm also a therapist and I work with psychedelics. That's primarily my focus. And I've been working with psychedelics like personally as well for like 14 years. So there's a bit of a history with it. And it's part of the reason why I'm so passionate to do it with people to help them heal. So I guess that's kind of the biggest part of myself right now.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lovely segue. I love how you introduce yourself in that you're a father and you're serving your kids and you're passionate about supporting and serving others.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about Anthony. Thinking back to your younger self before psychedelics, how would you describe your way of seeing the world or what felt true to you then?
I was a very curious kid. I was always interested in like ghosts and aliens and spirits and stuff like that. Like ever since I was a really small kid, and I'd go to the library, and that's what I would look. I would go to the G section. I would just look up ghosts, like any book I can find on ghosts. I was always into that stuff. So I think just from early childhood, I was just very open to like experiences that maybe other people would just think were not real.
Mhm.
So in some way, I think I was like primed to work with psychedelics.
What about ghosts and aliens attracted you?
Uh, our I don't even know if I should get into this, but our basement was haunted. We had a ghost in our basement. So that was one thing for sure. And it wasn't even just something that my family believed. It was like anyone who came to our house, like if I had friends come over, and we would do sleepovers in the basement, and
Oh.
you know, there was like activity that like tons of people saw, and so I was always fascinated by it.
Lots of folks would have that experience and they would be scared. It's interesting to me that as a kid, it was more of a fascination than a fear.
Well, we were scared. We were definitely scared. Yeah, we were definitely scared, but it's also fascinating too, right? Like most things that are fascinating that you don't really know anything about are scary also. So yeah, that's why I was kind of into it. And I'm not really sure what got me into like extraterrestrials and stuff, but I was always fascinated with them.
It
Yeah,
feels like an adjacent topic.
it does. It's like that X-Files feeling of, and never actually got into that show for some reason I should, but yeah, it's just that kind of like that outside of reality type of thing. I was always interested in that as a
And
kid.
and so it sounds like in your family, you had this collective experience of living with a spirit or an energy or a ghost. I'm curious, in your household, with that context, was spirituality or religion a big part of your life growing up?
I wouldn't say my family's, but I went to a Catholic school, so I learned about Jesus, and so Jesus was a big part of my life growing up, and, I was very spiritual. Like, I would pray for, like, 45 minutes a night when I was, like, 8. Like, it was, like, I was very organized about it, about my prayers, praying for the world, praying for people, praying for myself. I always had that strong spirituality, and then I lost it and became sort of atheist, and then I regained it back when I started working with psychedelics. So it's been a roller coaster, you know?
Yeah. When you think back to yourself as a kid and praying for people or for yourself, how did that act of prayer connect you to your spirituality? Or what did spirituality feel like to you back then?
I think I just was trying to connect with something that was, like, greater than me, and I was just a really sensitive child. I'm still sensitive, but I was a very sensitive child, so I just like, if I saw suffering, it, like, really, really hurt me, and I would just pray. If I saw suffering somewhere, I would just pray really hard for it to get better, and then I also had a ton of trauma in my own childhood from, like, personal trauma, so I would if I was having panic attacks, which I did for, like, years, every single night, I would just like, pray to, like, feel better, basically.
Did you feel supported by prayer or by your spirituality at that time? Because it sounds like that was quite a chaotic or difficult time to navigate as a kid.
I did yeah, I did, for sure. Yeah, I know that I did, and I think that's why I did it every night. I wouldn't miss my prayers.
Do you mind if I ask when and what led you to leave that spiritual practice that was so supportive?
Yeah, no, that's
You
a good
did
question.
eventually knowing that you did eventually come back to it, but where did that severance happen?
I think I think that my answer would probably be the same that a lot of other people would say, and that was just when I was starting to find out some of the things that the Catholic Church had done, and that was so misaligned with what I was learning about Jesus, and so I felt quite I don't know if betrayal is the right word, I just felt like I'd been fooled or something, and I became angry, and I just didn't wanna believe in anything anymore.
Yeah. It's not an uncommon experience, I guess, but I'm sorry because your faith gave you so much resourcing as a kid. I'm sorry that
Absolutely.
that severance happened for you.
Oh, yeah, it was painful for sure, and I see this a lot in therapy because I guess I would consider myself a spiritual therapist too, so a lot of people would come to me and I always ask them, "What's your spirituality?" And they sort of say the same thing that I just said to you. It's like, "I used to be,
Mhm.
spiritual, and then this happened, and then I'm not, and then now I'm refining it again," but they're finding it again in, like, a new way, like a more indigenous or a more land-based way, which is what happened to me.
Yeah. In that vein, I'm curious, as you were growing up, what was your relationship to wonder, or did you ever have any experiences of altered states of consciousness when you were a child?
Yeah, definitely I did. I think some of it maybe it's a good thing that I brought up the ghost because a lot of it really had to do with that, right? Just
Mhm. I bet.
yeah, just experiences of, floating above my bed and then landing, like, hard on my
Oh.
bed or if I was sleeping in the basement, feeling like my spirit was being pulled out of my body or that I was falling out of my body. Like I had a lot, I had experiences like that. My dreams were always very, very vivid and they were very different if I was in the basement, but my dreams were always very vivid. I'll get into this later with my first psychedelic experience, but kind of feels like the psychedelic experience like is the dream world in some way. So my dreams were always a little bit psychedelic in nature growing up, and they still are to a certain extent. But so yeah, there was lots of experiences like that growing up.
Wow. And again, both fascinating and terrifying, I expect.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Just out of curiosity, and as much as you feel like you want to talk about it, but how would you describe the ghost or the entity, the energy that you interacted with so much as a child? Did it have a personality for you, or do you still feel connected to it?
Yeah, I learned actually a lot about it in my ceremonies that I was doing later in my life. I learned more about it. I got a lot of insight about what it was and what it was doing. Yeah, it definitely wasn't a good spirit. It was a bad one for sure. But, when our friends were over, we'd have a bit more courage. So if we were doing a sleepover and there's like four of our friends, we would taunt it. And that was like bad because mirrors would like come off the wall or like if there was and shatter or, we were making fun of it, suddenly the bench press machine would just like completely flip. And we would be so scared and we'd turn on the light and we'd be like, how the heck did that bench press machine just flip over? Yeah.
Hmm. Last maybe question around your childhood experiences and the confluence of spirituality and resourcing and navigating the situation. How would you describe your relationship to fear as a kid?
Um, I had a lot of fear in my childhood and I just had a lot of repressed fear too. That's where the panic attacks were coming from. It was like my body was trying to discharge it out of my body. And there was, physical abuse and stuff and just not feeling safe kind of in my house.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a lot of fear in my childhood. But bravery was always like a concept that was really important to me. I always gravitated towards, TV characters or, you know, characters from books that were brave. I always found that really important.
Yeah. I
Um,
ask that in part because I hear so much fear in how you describe those situations, but I also hear so much bravery in that you'd still take your friends down and go to the basement, and you'd still be seeking out these books and wanting to learn more and engage. There's a really
yeah.
interesting, like, interplay between fear and curiosity in what you're describing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I always wanted to learn about like dark, scary stuff. Like I'd be a kid and I'd want to learn about cults. I don't know why they're so scary, and I'd want to learn about them and understand them. And you know, I'm sure there's some purpose for it. Well, there definitely is some purpose for it, but maybe there's even more purpose ahead of me in my life that I don't know about yet. But I was always interested in that sort of thing, but
Yeah,
equally scared of it too.
I bet.
Yeah.
Were psychedelics ever discussed when you were growing up, either positively or negatively?
No, not psychedelics, drugs for sure. Like my mom was always like, "Don't do drugs, like ever." She was very much against it, and I always remember, some of my as I was getting older, in my late teens, and some of my friends started, using cannabis, and I always remember thinking like, "Well, I'm not, going to use cannabis because my dad never used cannabis." And then one day I turned 18. My dad took me out for dinner, and we're just talking, and he kind of like casually mentions that he used cannabis once, and then I was like, "Really?" And then that night, I used cannabis for the first time. It's like I had permission. And cannabis is an entheogen. It's like it's a psychedelic, right? So that was my first time using a psychedelic, and it was incredible, you know?
And what was that experience like? Is that's a very short distance between awareness and permission and using it.
Yeah, I don't we were in, like, downtown. It wasn't like a good experience in that way, but it was good in the sense that, like, just feeling that high for the first time, that was really fascinating to me because I was already super sensitive, and then to have that amplified was really felt really special. And then I had some, long after that, had some really, really intense cannabis experiences with my wife, my current wife. And that really showed me the power of cannabis as like an entheogen.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to ask even just one question about that. I'm interested in, it was a no, and then you heard that your father did it, and it was a yes literally hours later.
Yeah.
I'm curious what that first experience was like in the sense of, did it remind you of some of these non-ordinary experiences that you had as a child, or did it feel like something completely different?
I don't know. I mean, my first experience, like I was saying, like downtown, probably not, but afterwards when I would, smoke with my wife, that was very special, you know. I might even consider that my first like psychedelic experience because I was incredibly high and the experience I had was very, very profound and deeply spiritual, much more than even my first ayahuasca experience.
Wow.
It was I would say it was on par with some of my more intense ayahuasca experiences that I've had and psilocybin experiences, that cannabis experience that I'm talking about.
We'll we'll move into your first ayahuasca experience. Do you mind exploring this cannabis experience a little bit together if
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
comfortable with it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I smoked with my wife and,
Did you have the intention of, or what kind of intention did you go into that experience with? Was it just another, we'll smoke a little bit and feel relaxed, or was there a different intention that you had?
no, there was no real spiritual intention. It was just to do it for fun, but it had other plans for me,
Yeah.
as it often does. Yeah, I was really high and I was kind of panicking and I sort of said to Jenna, I'm like, "Can you like, I think I need to go to the hospital." And she was like, "No, no, no, you're okay." And she kind of supported me through it. But I just like, I just remember it almost felt like I was in the Akashic records. I could see all of these like almost like almost like cabinets of light, and I can like go into them, and then and I was kind of learning like that anytime I went into one, it was like I was going into a specific year of my life, and then I can go into like a specific day, right down to like the second, and I would be going back to like my childhood and just seeing what it felt like to be lying in bed and just how alone I felt and how unsupported I felt, and then just being there for a moment and just feeling what that felt like, and then jumping out and going to another file almost, and then pulling that out and just experiencing that. It was just so vivid. It was like I was there, and I was jumping across different time periods of my life and really seeing kind of how scared I was because I was having a bit of a panic attack during that experience. So I was going back and seeing all the times maybe where all that fear was repressed, and so it was a powerful healing experience. I wouldn't have understood that at the time, but I do now.
Hmm. That sounds really powerful, Anthony.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's the really beautiful, powerful medicine of these psychedelics and
Yeah.
entheogens. They're not easy experiences. The best experiences are the ones that are like the hardest.
Often. What
Often,
was
yeah.
what was it like coming back from that experience, or what was the come down for you after having that really intense experience with?
I don't even know that I really was mature enough to understand the power of psychedelics and just how like profound they could be. But yeah, it was shocking for sure to know that that was possible, that you can go back to
Mhm.
memories and like kind of process them if you hadn't fully completed them. It was kind of mind blowing at the time.
I'm so glad that you had your partner there and that you felt so well supported. Did you talk about it with her, or did you just prefer to, like, "Whoa, I don't know what just happened. I'm just gonna keep this to myself"?
No, I spoke with her about it. Jenna's a therapist too. She's a very good therapist. So I'm like extremely fortunate to have gone through most of my if not all of my psychedelic experiences with her by my side and vice versa, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm glad that you were supported in that unfolding.
Oh yeah. Support is everything when you're doing psychedelics. And a lot of people might not understand that. I didn't maybe fully understand how important it was, but I do now for sure.
Hmm. So once the seal was broken with cannabis, you then had some very powerful experiences with cannabis. I'm
Yeah.
curious how your walk towards other psychedelic substances unfolded and when it felt like ayahuasca, for example, might be a medicine that you want to connect with?
I think, that was an opening to understand the power of plant medicine. And then we moved to the West Coast. We were living in Vancouver, and Jenna went and saw Gabor Mate live. It's about 14 years ago. So he wasn't even, I don't even think he was really that famous at the time, but he was, starting to become well known. And he kind of mentioned it. And, he mentioned this plant medicine that can help you heal. And Jenna was like a laser guided missile. She was just like, tell me more. Where can I do it? And so we got the contact for the community, and then we started working with that community. So that's what led us to our first experience.
Was there a motivation? Was it a curiosity? Was there a particular sort of inner intuition around it? Was there something that felt like it needed to be healed? What pulled you in that direction?
Well, I would say probably Jenna was the biggest
Hmm.
pull towards that. She's very feminine and she's very into that like self healing, and she still is. She studies it extensively, and so she was very very motivated, and I was kind of just like going along with her. I was like, just I wanted to go and support her and also just experience it with her, and she was the driving force to go the first time we went for ayahuasca.
So it sounds like you were being led by and supportive of her desire to move forwards and to explore this substance. How did you feel as you were arriving and contemplating going into your first ayahuasca circle with this community?
I was very excited because of what I was hearing about it. I mean, obviously, I had experience with entheogens like cannabis, and so I was had some experience, and I was excited to see, what it would be like. And then there wasn't, 14 years ago, there wasn't like a ton of information on it. Like now, it's very popular, but it wasn't that popular back then. And so it was just a lot of curiosity.
Did
And
you do any reading or how did you prepare for that first journey?
while I didn't really prepare at all. I would say I was totally unprepared for it. But, I was meant to have that experience because now I'm a therapist that literally prepares people for those experiences. So it's good for me to go in having experienced, not being prepared, because I learned a lot from making mistakes. So yeah.
Yes. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that first, what I presume you consider to be that first experience.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah. Mhm.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the setting was for that first experience. Was it a large group? Was there a shaman? Was it, yeah, what was the support
Yeah.
structure like?
I think there was maybe 3 shamans at the time, maybe 4 if there was an apprentice, but the group felt big to me. I don't remember counting. There might have been 25 people. It was big circle, yeah. On a very I don't wanna reveal the location, not that
Of
it's
course.
not happening anymore. There's really not a lot of this happening in Canada anymore for the government's become quite strict about it, but it's just on a really, really small island in the West Coast, and so that was the setting. We were just way out in nature.
Did they give you any information beforehand about coming, or did you do any sort of physical preparations as part of moving into the circle?
No, it was hilarious. Like, I showed up, we didn't have anything. I had no mattress, like, nothing. I just showed up and, like, laid on the ground, and we were I I really mean it when I say, like, I was unprepared, for this first experience.
And there was no information provided around, like, foods to avoid or medications, anything
I'm
like it
trying
doesn't
to
have to have been, but I'm just curious.
no, I'm trying to remember. I think there might have been, because I'll tell you, later on, after about 7 years of being part of this community, we became the support for the community. Like, we became sort of like doing therapy for the people, and sending out that type of information, that sort of like harm reduction information. And
Yes.
so I would imagine that we received it because there were documents, and we added to them. So yeah, I would imagine there was information.
But you didn't absorb much of it,
Well,
perhaps.
no, I mean, I was like, I was immature at the time. I was probably 26.
Mhm.
Um, not a lot of, like, self-awareness. It was, like, the very beginning of my healing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're in this circle with a lot of people. You don't have a mattress. You don't have a lot of creature comforts around as you're moving into this experience. How did you feel when it was time to have your first drink of ayahuasca?
I don't know. I mean, I went up and drank it, and it's, like, quite shocking, the taste, and I remember, thinking that it wasn't working, even though I definitely was high in retrospect, but I remember thinking that it wasn't working and that I wasn't really going deep, and I think I ended up drinking, like, 3 cups that night. Like, the shaman just kept giving me more and more, and then he would chant to me because he was trying to open me up. I was quite closed at the time, and I wasn't a very trusting person as a result of my trauma. So I had the experience that I was meant to have. It was quite I would consider it quite gentle. Other people around are just, like, throwing up so much and just having, like, what sounded like an awful experience. Just I remember talking to people afterwards, and it was like their nights were way more intense than mine. I've since had very intense nights, but that one wasn't. It was a really gentle introduction. I was very lucky, I guess, to have that.
Hmm. What were some of the main lessons that you learned from that first journey?
You know, Now I can talk about it. At the time, I don't know if I really felt like I got too much out of it because I didn't have a therapist leading into it. I didn't have a therapist, like, on the other side of it. I didn't really have a lot of support, so I don't know if the integration piece wasn't there for me. But if I look back at it now, I think it was really, yeah, just about my lack of trust. It was about my fear and my closed nature.
Hmm.
Yeah, like almost like a closed, defended nature. I think that's kind of what it was about. I almost didn't let the ayahuasca, like, go too deep on me. I almost, like, didn't let it happen, you know?
Yes. I mean, an aside, but yeah, it's funny how much control we actually have in those
Yeah.
spaces. I have a friend who drank 9 times before he finally cracked. It was wild. And I also had an experience once where it was just I was overwhelmed, and I just asked for a break, and I was so sober.
Yeah.
I just observed for about 20 minutes, and I was like, "Okay, I'm ready to go back." Back in the
Oh, I
medicine.
really believe that. Like, because if I'm doing experiences with clients and if they're having an intense experience, I don't know if they believe this. I mean, I want them to, but they believe what they want, right? But I believe that some part of them agreed to that, or a very, very large part of them agreed that they wanted to go deep like that. And so that's the experience you're having.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm curious, so you had this experience together with your partner. Did you talk to your friends or family about it, or did you process it together at all? How did you because this became something very important to you in your life, in those early days, was it something that you were open about and talking about, or was it something that was more private?
Yes, it was. And, before I answer that question, I'll just add to one thing you said. I also had that similar experience of drinking multiple times, before I felt like I really started connecting with the medicine.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, what I felt was happening to me and why I wasn't having these deep experiences, but we can talk about that after. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I was, like, just so excited about the experience that I tell anyone about it, and that was a big mistake. It's a very private experience, and generally, I think people found that it was really weird and that it was yeah, there wasn't a positive, like, response with respect to psychedelics 14 years ago,
Yeah.
if I would tell my
This
friends.
the stigma is better now, but I can imagine 14 years ago, that would have been really complex to try to communicate to others.
Yeah, maybe the only person who was into it was my friend Marco, and my best friend Marco, and he was at the time working for Douglas Cardinal, who's a Anishinaabe elder, and I actually, when I moved home, I worked, for Doug as well. So he was going to sweat lodge every week. And so I think, not that they were using psychedelics in the sweat lodge, they weren't, but he was used to having that very powerful spiritual experience where you're
Yes.
connecting to that part of yourself, but you're doing it through, like, intense heat and sweating
Mm.
and prayer. And so he was very respectful and very open to it,
Well,
but
that's
no one else
beautiful.
was.
Yeah. So what did it take for you to move from that first experience of feeling quite closed and reserved to being able to open up into the medicine?
I had done several experiences, and I don't remember what ceremony it was, maybe my 6th or 7th ceremony, and I kinda went up to the shaman, and I was a little bit angry, and just kind of said to him, like, what's going on? Like, this isn't working for me. And I was very frustrated. And he said to me, he said, do you smoke cannabis? And I said, yeah. And he says, all I see around you is smoke. And he says, it's really blocking your experience and you're abusing it, the cannabis, because it's a sacred medicine. I I quit smoking right after. I hadn't smoked since that experience. When he said that to me, I stopped smoking, like cold turkey. I was smoking like 3 times a day. I was like very addicted to it. And from that point on, I stopped smoking. And then as I would continue going to ayahuasca, the experiences started really opening for me. And it was almost like when I decided to show some respect to myself and to these plant medicines, it's almost like that's when it really started to like open up for me.
Hmm. I'm glad that you found that rhythm to allowing yourself to be in a relationship with the medicines in that way, and for both of you to feel respected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm. I'm curious, Anthony, this is something I sometimes ask folks, but we often talk about a calling, whether it's an artistic or in a spiritual sense. I'm curious, do you feel that psychedelics called to you in some way?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Like I was saying, my whole childhood, I had so much trauma, and then I was also just so into the supernatural. I was just almost like I was like a prime target for it. I was just so open to it, whereas a lot of people, if they heard about it, a lot of people that still hear about it are not open to it. I would like talk about it, and people would make like such, I would call it racist comments, like, well, ethnocentric, comments, right? "Oh, are you gonna start wearing fish bones on your neck now?" And they would try to make it sound like I was doing some voodoo stuff. Yeah, it was very disrespectful, to the indigenous cultures. That's the ethnocentrism, right? Is just like seeing their culture from a very biased, white lens, like colonizer lens.
Yeah.
And, so that was what I was getting a lot of, just people that would make fun of it or think that I was crazy because I was working with plant medicines and believed that they were conscious and that they could teach me things
Mhm. Mhm.
about myself.
We started by drawing a thread from your childhood to your psychedelic experiencing. I'm curious what that thread looks like for you today and what pieces of that thread and that difficult childhood continue to be alive for you or have transformed for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it's all about the trauma, because understanding your trauma is maybe the most important thing you can do in your life. Because your trauma it's all lessons. It's all just experiences that I believe you come to this planet to learn, right? About yourself and about humanity. And that's what it's been about, and I'm still doing that work, like, I'll be doing that work until I die, Your trauma is intense and it's heavy and it's not gonna go away easily. That's a misconception, I think, about psychedelics, that some people think that if they do it one time, they'll be healed. It'll heal a lot in you if you approach it appropriately, but the work is ongoing, because the
Mhm.
shamans would say things like, "The real ceremony is not what we're about to do. The real ceremony is your life. You have to, like, go into your life and make very significant changes, and you have to look at the negative thought patterns and the negative behavioral patterns, and you need to stop them." So that's what it really did for me.
Mhm.
Uh, that was really the greatest gift that it gave to me and continues really to give to me.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you know to be true now that you wish little Anthony had known?
Ah, I think maybe the most important thing is like how much love and compassion you need to give yourself, and authenticity is very important, and fully like honoring your emotions and letting those fully be processed, because I think most illness comes from like not processing our emotions. It's just like energy that just sits in your body and affects everything. And I think there's going to come a time in our life where we'll be able to quantify or measure that through science, but right now, I don't think we can, but I think a lot of people are talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's one thing that you wish you had known before you embarked on this psychedelic journey that you're on?
Um, I think I wish that I knew more about the indigenous cultures that it came from because I didn't really know that. That was something that I learned as I was doing it because the shamans would talk about it because they were coming from a lineage from the Amazon. So I think that's really important. That context is really important.
Mm.
The ethnocentricity is super important with psychedelics because it could really block quite a bit of the healing if you go into it thinking that you know more or that your culture knows more. So that's an important piece, I think. Would have been nice for me to know a little bit more about. Would have been nice for me to have had a therapist before going in too, because then I would have had like very specific goals. I had no goals when I went in. I could have gone in and said, I really, really need to look at like being physically abused and what that's done to me as a person and how it's caused me to become so close and so untrusting. Yeah, it would have been great to have goals like that. I didn't have goals like that for a while.
Yeah. Any other pieces of advice that you would give someone who is on this journey or is thinking about entering into it?
I mean, this will sound self-serving because I'm a therapist that literally prepares people, but I would say it doesn't have to be me, but just get someone to help you, that someone who understands this and not someone who's done it like a few times, like someone who really, really gets it and understands how hard it is because it's all about informed consent. You can't do something unless you have the information. Like you can't consent to something unless you really truly like have all the information about it. And one thing that's really missed in our culture is the spiritual aspect of it. And so many people in the psychedelic field either they're scared to talk about it or they don't want to talk about it.
Mhm.
Even mentors, I've had experiences with clients where, in my opinion, there was an entity that was very, very bad that was attached to a specific person. And talking about that in a mentorship role and hearing people say things like, "That's not real, and you shouldn't even be considering that as an option for what happened to that client." But for me, that was 100% what was happening, and when I consulted with, like, indigenous people or shamans, they would reassure me that I was right because they have a specific way of looking at it, looking at the medicine and looking at the healing, and they look at it from a spiritual perspective, and our culture doesn't. So that's a big piece of it. I would want people to really make sure that they're working with someone who understands it from that perspective. Because if you're not working with someone from that perspective, you are missing a massive, massive part of that world.
Yes. Anthony, it's been so lovely to be able to trace your psychedelic roots together. I'm curious as we're coming into the present day, how would you describe your relationship to your journey and to your path and to the medicine today?
It's just a really important part of my life. Now when I use cannabis, I use it once every 3 to 4 weeks with intention, and it's very powerful, and I get a lot of healing out of it. And that's not at all how I used it growing up. And I'm still a student, right? I'm still just trying to learn as much as I possibly can so I can like help people. And, we've been in conversation even with our college about how therapists will or can use this like safely. So we've been advising them on what we think. And so it's a big responsibility. And I'll ask the medicine what needs to be shared, with the public or what needs to be shared with these regulatory bodies. So I'll talk to them about harm reduction because it's not legal and harm reduction needs to exist. I'll talk to them about spirituality and ethnocentricity because that's very, very important, and that those perspectives are allowed to exist. People are afraid to talk about it for being made fun of or for coming across unscientific or whatever you would say.
Mhm.
So that's the stuff that's really important to me now is like
Mhm.
really just trying to get that information out there
Mhm.
and proper training too. We're going to work on some type of training program for other therapists where they can feel protected and their clients can feel protected because there are lots of training programs that exist and they're really good, but they're not experiential. I think you need to be working with these medicines a lot before you start becoming a mentor and doing it with other people. like more than 5 times. Like I want to say like 20 times, like minimum.
Yes,
Yeah, minimum 20 times.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. It is. Anthony, it's been such a pleasure to hear your
Yeah.
story and to explore your psychedelic roots together. I learned a lot about you and about the different ways that these paths can unfold. Your story is really unique and also very classic in some ways too. And I really appreciate all these threads that are woven together to create your specific braid. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you for having me and thank you for the questions. And I think this is a really cool podcast. I think this is really cool to hear these stories from people. I think it's so necessary right now in this renaissance, I guess we're calling it the psychedelic renaissance. I think it's like so important for this information to be out there. It's the perfect time for it. The podcast era is the perfect time for people to be taking this information in.
Hmm. Well, thank you for contributing to it and to sharing your story today. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Thank you.